Have you ever smiled when you wanted to scream? Nodded when your chest burned with disagreement? Stayed quiet because speaking would mean risk of rejection, conflict, or simply being seen. They call it being kind, being polite, being the bigger person. But what if I told you none of that is kindness? What if I told you it's fear, wrapped in good manners, dressed in decency? You let them talk over you. You laugh at jokes that hurt. You say yes, even when your soul whispers a trembling no. They applaud your tolerance, but they don't see your wounds, because tolerance, when rooted in fear, is not strength. It's a slow erosion of the self. So ask yourself, who are you when no one is asking you to smile? That's where we begin. There is a moment, subtle but violent, when your soul flinches. It happens not when others hurt you, but when you allow them to. Again, and again, and again. Because you've been taught that peace is better than truth, that harmony matters more than honesty, that tolerance is noble, even when it costs your integrity. But Nietzsche said it clearly. What we call virtue is often just fear in disguise. And tolerance? It is the camouflage of the coward. You say you don't want to hurt others, but why do you let them hurt you? You say it's not worth the fight. But who told you your self-worth was worth so little? This is the paradox of being nice. You end up living someone else's life. You wear the mask so long, your skin forgets the shape of truth. Carl Jung calls this the persona, the social mask we wear to survive. But survive is not live. And too much tolerance kills the self, because every time you choose to let it go, you teach them how to treat you. Every time you smile through the sting, you erase a piece of your boundary. And boundaries, my friend, are not walls. They are declarations. They say, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. When you lose them, you vanish. So no, you're not keeping the peace. You're declaring war against your own soul. Can you see it now? Can you feel that ache that never goes away? That's the cost of cowardice dressed as compassion. One day, you will look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back.
Do you ever feel like someone finally sees the part of you you've always hidden? Here, you don't have to hide anymore. You're safe now. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so we can keep walking this path together. Thank you.
Because the one who tolerated everything has tolerated herself away. That's when the rebellion must begin. Not outside, but within. Reclaiming your voice is not aggression. It is resurrection. It is the slow, trembling return to truth. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises." So even in your silent suffering, there's still a fragment of self-worth screaming for light. Let it scream. Let it break. Let it burn every false piece you've ever swallowed. And when they ask you, what changed? Tell them, I stopped being so tolerant because I finally remembered who I am. So then, what happens when you finally say no? When you stop smiling? When you let the silence speak for real? There's a violence that doesn't bleed, a scream that never leaves your throat, a fist clenched so tightly inside your chest, no one ever sees it, but you feel it. Every day, you say you're fine, always fine. You listen, nod, smile, even when they trample your spirit, even when they cross lines you no longer dare to draw. But deep down, something starts to rot. Politeness, when weaponized against yourself, becomes resentment. And resentment, repressed long enough, becomes rage, silent, hidden, dangerous. You've swallowed too much, and now your soul is starving for truth. So here's the question. What happens to a person who never lets themselves say no? They disappear. But worse, they burn quietly. Until one day, they explode. We've been sold a lie. That tolerance is always virtue. That bending is wisdom. That giving up space is growth. But let me ask you, who benefits from your silence? Who gains when you say yes, just to avoid discomfort? Not you, not your truth, not the self waiting behind your mask. Nietzsche warned us, when you suppress your will to power, you suppress life itself. And what is life without power? It is survival without sovereignty, movement without direction. You give, and they keep taking. You agree, and they keep demanding. You tolerate, and they keep pushing. You tell yourself you're keeping the peace. But that's not peace, that's permission. Permission for others to overstep, to overwrite, to own. Carl Jung saw this too. He called it the shadow. The parts of us we exile to stay lovable. But exiled truth always returns. And when it does, it returns angry. That anger you feel? It's sacred. It's the last honest part of you, screaming not to be buried again. So no, you're not too sensitive. You're awake, you're raw, you're real. And that truth you've been denying? It doesn't go away. It waits, patiently, painfully, until the moment you finally crack. Because here's the brutal irony. The more you tolerate, the more intolerable your life becomes. One day, it won't be a big betrayal that breaks you. It'll be something small, a joke, a glance, a silence that should have held care, but didn't. And suddenly, the dam inside you bursts. You erupt, but they won't understand, because they only saw your mask, never your truth. And so they'll call you crazy, dramatic, too much, but you're not too much. You were just never allowed to be enough. You must reclaim your right to resist, to disagree, to say no. Not from bitterness, but from clarity. Because when tolerance becomes a cage, defiance becomes salvation. Let the anger rise, not to destroy, but to define. Let it carve boundaries. Let it burn illusions. Let it sanctify your truth. There is no virtue in enduring what wounds you. There is no strength in silence when it erases your soul. You were not made to be agreeable. You were made to be whole. So yes, your softness was beautiful. But now it must harden. Now it must become spine, flame, sword. Because being nice won't save you. But being real, that just might. So the next time someone asks for more than you can give, don't smile, don't explain, just breathe and walk away. And if they call that rude, let them. Let them choke on the absence of your obedience, because you're not theirs to mold. You're your own. There's a weight that follows you, and it speaks one word: sorry. Sorry for asking. Sorry for interrupting. Sorry for having needs. For crying too much or too little. For being loud or too quiet. For existing in a way that isn't neat and polished and easy to love. It starts young. They tell you to be agreeable, to be good, to be nice. And without knowing, you begin to trade pieces of yourself for approval. You learn to smile when you're breaking, to nod when you should walk away, to apologize for truths that deserve to be spoken. But that's not kindness. That's conditioning. And one day you realize you've been saying sorry for being alive in your own skin. The tragedy? They made you think your truth was an inconvenience. And now, every time it tries to speak, your mouth forms the word sorry. You say sorry when someone bumps into you. Sorry when you cry. Sorry when you don't reply fast enough. Sorry when you need space. Sorry for needing anything at all. But what if I told you? Every unnecessary apology chips away at your identity. Each one tells your nervous system, you are wrong for being. There is a version of you that has never known how to ask for what she needs. Because every time she tried, she was told she was selfish, dramatic, too much. So she learned to apologize before speaking, to shrink before entering the room, to mute herself in the name of love. But love that demands silence is not love. It is control in disguise. Nietzsche once said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." And when you don't command your truth, someone else will command your guilt. Guilt becomes your leash. Politeness becomes your prison. And you live a life that looks good on the outside, but inside, you are screaming. You apologize because you've been told you don't have the right to feel wronged. You say sorry because you've been trained to believe that speaking up is violence. But silence is not innocence. Silence is slow soul suicide. And when you keep swallowing your voice to keep the peace, eventually you disappear. Carl Jung spoke of the unlived life. He warned that what you deny will rule you from the shadows. So every part of you that you've hushed, every instinct you've apologized for, it hasn't gone away. It waits, it watches, it becomes resentment. And then one day, someone says something small, something harmless, something normal. But you erupt, not because they were cruel, but because your body remembers every time you weren't allowed to exist fully. And this time, you couldn't hold it in. That eruption isn't madness. It's your truth, finally coming up for air. So what if, next time, you didn't apologize? Not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. What if you spoke your truth and let the discomfort exist? What if you let people misunderstand you without rushing to soften the blow? What if you stopped managing everyone else's comfort and started honoring your own? You don't owe the world an apology for being awake. You don't owe them your silence, your smile, your shrinkage. The version of you who keeps saying sorry, she is tired, she is bruised, she has carried the weight of everyone's expectations, and she is ready to put it down. So let her rest. Let her stop kneeling. Let her stand. And if your truth makes others uncomfortable, so be it. Their comfort is not your responsibility. Your truth is. The next time the word sorry rises up by reflex, pause. Feel your spine straighten and say something different. Say, I meant what I said. Say, I need what I need. Say, I am allowed to take up space, because you are not an apology. You are a reclamation. And this is the beginning of your return. There's a deep ache inside you that longs to be seen, not heard politely, not tolerated, but truly, deeply understood. You explain yourself too often. You overclarify. You write paragraphs to justify a single sentence. You walk on eggshells. You measure each word. You rehearse your honesty until it's palatable. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that truth, raw, unfiltered truth, is dangerous. It gets misread, rejected, mocked. So now, you try to be real, but only in ways that keep others comfortable. You perform your pain like a monologue you hope they'll clap for. You soften your edges with disclaimers. You smile when your chest is cracking. Because being misunderstood, it scares you more than silence ever did. But here's the truth you keep running from. You don't need to be understood. You need to be free. The urge to be understood is holy. But when it becomes obsession, it becomes bondage. You tie yourself in linguistic knots, trying to make someone else feel what you feel. You translate your soul into a language not meant for it, and then wonder why no one hears you clearly. You speak, they twist your words. You share, they minimize. You cry, they call it weakness, and still you try again. Because your trauma trained you to think love is earned through clarity. But real love does not require translation. Real love meets you in the fog. Real love says, I don't fully get it, but I won't let go. Nietzsche warned us about herd morality. He said that when you try too hard to be accepted, you flatten your spirit. You become digestible, approachable, but never whole. So ask yourself, how many times have you betrayed your truth just to be included? How many parts of yourself have you blurred just to be received? Carl Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires separation, aloneness, isolation, and maybe that's what you've been avoiding all along. Not rejection, but the void that follows authenticity. Because when you stop explaining, many people walk away. They were never listening to understand. They were listening to stay in control. But silence does not mean defeat. It means release. It means you're finally done auditioning, done rehearsing your trauma into digestible bites, done trying to convince them you're worth holding. And once that happens, something strange appears in the silence. Peace. Not the peace that comes from being understood, but the peace that comes from understanding yourself. Let them not get it. Let them think you've changed. Let them call you distant, cold, hard. Let them miss the version of you who bent until she broke. The one who filled in every blank, who explained every emotion, who begged to be seen. Because that version of you, she's gone. She left when you realized your worth was never in their comprehension. It was in your own conviction. You are not here to be decoded. You are here to be whole. So speak, and let your words fall where they may. Some will misinterpret you. Some will turn away. Let them not understand, because the ones who stay, they won't need subtitles to love you. And more importantly, you won't need permission to exist. Next, we go to the final return, not to who you were, but who you were always meant to be, without apology, without translation, without tolerance for anything less than truth. What happens when you stop bending? Not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. What happens when you stop making yourself easier to love? When you stop shrinking to fit the frame of someone else's comfort? Something dies, but something far more sacred is born. You become untamed. You become vast. You become the version of yourself that no longer asks for permission to exist. It is terrifying, but it is also the most honest you've ever been. Because this isn't about rebellion anymore. It's about return. Return to the self you buried beneath every smile, every sorry, every yes that meant no. And this return, it's not loud, it's not showy, it's quiet, like a breath you didn't know you were holding, finally exhaled. You used to ask before you spoke. Now you speak. You used to wonder if they'd still like you after you said it. Now you know that your truth is more important than their approval. This is the shift, from compliant to conscious, from tolerated to true, from performing to presence. You no longer explain yourself, not because you're cold, but because you finally understand that your clarity doesn't require consensus. You no longer apologize for who you've become, because who you've become is not a mistake. It is a remembering, a homecoming. The old you fought for belonging. This version of you walks alone, not in loneliness, but in integrity. Carl Jung called it individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole by confronting the shadow, reclaiming the self, and no longer fragmenting to be loved. You've touched your shadow now. You've seen what people are capable of when you say no. And you've survived it. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to you. You've realized that peace doesn't always look like softness. It often looks like solitude. And you've accepted something most never do. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be real. You've watched entire relationships dissolve the moment you stopped being agreeable. And yes, it hurt, but it also showed you what was never real to begin with. Now you walk differently. You speak with a stillness that makes people listen. You choose silence, not out of fear, but because it is your domain. You're no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You're afraid of betraying yourself again. You no longer keep the peace. You are the peace, because no one can take from you what you no longer outsource. Validation, worth, power, they all belong to you now. So this is what the end looks like. Not a finish line, but a mirror. You see yourself now, the real you, unbent, unfiltered, undiluted. The you who doesn't flinch when someone disapproves. The you who holds her boundaries like sacred altars. The you who doesn't explain why she walked away. You've become someone your younger self needed. You've become the mother of your own voice, the protector of your own fire. And now you don't ask who you're allowed to be. You simply are. That's the final freedom. Not to be fearless, but to be faithful to yourself, even when it's lonely, even when it's misunderstood, even when it costs you the entire world you once thought you needed. Nietzsche once said, "Become who you are, not who they praise, not who they expect, but who you were before they told you to change." So become her, the woman who no longer tolerates what steals from her soul, the man who no longer negotiates his dignity, the self who no longer performs to be worthy. And when the world asks you to go back, smile. Not out of politeness, but out of peace. Because once you've returned to your truth, there is no going back. Only forward, only deeper, only truer. Until one day, someone looks at you and says, "You're different now." And you'll know, "No, I'm not different. I'm finally real."